This podcast is brought to you by Third Wave Water. With their mineral blends that are designed for every roast level and even specific brew types, you're able to not only enhance the quality in the cup, but also, almost as importantly, avoid corrosion or scale buildup in your prized equipment. In short, they've done the hard part for you. All you've got to do is mix in water and brew. So if you're looking to take that next big step in search of the perfect cup, remember water makes up to 98% of what's in it, and head over to thirdwavewater.com/Prometheus for 10% off your first purchase. Welcome to the first episode of Over Extracted, the podcast where I'm going to be hosting, bringing on coffee people, conversational, pretty low-key, one-on-one conversations type of thing. Maybe more people in the future, but in the grand scheme right now, we're just kind of starting things off with an easy one. Someone that I know I interact well with, someone that prior to the Sprometheus days, we did a podcast together that very few people probably even remember or know of in my audience. So I'd like to welcome my guest, Siri.
Asa, thank you for having me. This
Of course.
is so awesome.
Thank you for coming.
I love your studio, and I feel like we haven't seen each other in a while, so it's gonna just be nice to catch up and even talk coffee. Like, I feel like in the time we have spent with each other, it's like life things, and coffee always works its way into it. But
True.
I'm sure we'll have a little bit of both.
Yeah, if I had to reel in on the gossip, we got that mostly out of the way. In the
I know, we gotta
earlier.
get it out in the beginning.
So
we're not just talking shit the whole time.
We kept the name dropping in there, and then in here we're just going to be like, not person's name. Yeah, just keep it low key. But that's what I was thinking. Like, it's been a minute, and when it comes to like these podcasts too, it's just like, oftentimes it's so hyper focused, or like interviewing somebody who is in a position like I'm in. And
I think it's like, tell us all your creative secrets, Asa. We want,
I think I just get like
YouTube placard on our wall.
Yeah. You know what the secret is? Shorts. Just doing YouTube shorts, because it's just a secret to getting followers, but they won't watch your full length videos. So that's a trick too.
It is interesting in coffee. It's such a, at least on the like internet side of things, it's such a popularity contest.
Oh, 100%.
And, there's also hundreds of us, really passionate and working really hard.
There's hundreds of us out there.
Probably thousands.
Yeah.
But you only see so many faces. So I love this idea. I love the idea of bringing people on who, have maybe a lot to say or just have a perspective in our industry and can like share it with you as someone who's like played a lot of different roles in it. And you're a fun guy to talk to.
I think
I feel like we have pretty good banter.
We do. I feel like, yeah, I see, yeah, like you say, you see a lot of the same faces, and, I guess to a certain extent, my face is one of those faces, but that was never my goal either, like I never was like, I want to be an influencer. Because honestly, I don't even like to say that word. I don't even like to call myself that. It's very, I don't know. It feels bad, man. Like I don't like it. And I mean, this is being recorded prior to my most recent video coming out, talking about why I'm doing the podcast and why I'm changing my content. So people probably have already seen that, so they might understand that. But like, the whole idea of influencing is like to advertise, and I just kind of feel like I don't really want to do that all the time. Yeah. Like, sure, some of it's fine. Like, I love my sponsors, and I never bring on sponsors that aren't like things I enjoy or use or like actually stand behind. But it's just it's just gotten so commercialized, and those faces of those influencers have become more or less commercialized.
Yeah.
Like, their presence is a commercial, and I just don't want that for me. And so I'm just like, let's do something that's more personal, more at least interesting to me, and hopefully it'll be interesting for people to watch or listen to, because I'm, hoping to have this not only on video but audio form. So it's like, why limit myself to trying to talk to people who have reviewed the same grinder and talk to people who actually are doing things completely outside of what I do?
Yeah. There's got to be something kind of jarring too like working in coffee, where for a lot of us, I feel like it's about community, it's about people, it's about connection, and to like be a part of that, and
Mhm.
then to start making content, and obviously you're connecting with people, but in a completely different way. Like not so much face to face like we are
Mhm.
right now. And I just feel like that would be so jarring to be like, I'm surrounded by all these people with lots of thoughts and ideas and creative ideas in coffee. And, you can be like, hey, what do you think about this taste? And like, it's just you in here.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, I can imagine it's a little bit isolating. So I just think the idea of a podcast of like getting people in here, like sharing this space, it like brings back maybe some of the stuff that like was at the core of it. And
True.
yeah, and I never saw you as, like, that kind of stereotypical, of course, you care about the community, but, like,
Mhm.
you are very, I feel like you obviously have your own voice and your own space and, like, especially as a roaster, I feel like your personality fits in with the roasting side of things,
It
maybe a little
does.
more than the happy, cheery barista behind the bar.
Yeah. Not a social creature. Not a social creature. It is very weird to, like, go to what are they, like, the expo or any trade show, which is like Coffee Fest, there's only a few, and just have people come up to you and be like, "Oh, I love your videos." It's just like, not that I don't like, not that I'm not filled with any sort of like, I'm honored. I'm
Yeah,
like shocked at the same time, but it's just very, that type of interaction is just so foreign to me.
totally.
And I get it here too. Sometimes when I go out for coffee, I'll run into somebody who's like, "Oh, are you the guy who makes the YouTube videos?" I'm like, "Yep."
The guy.
Yeah.
The guy inside my phone.
I do think it's weird people still, when people call me like in person, call me like Spro, who know my real name too. I think it's like that's kind of odd, but
That's like your nickname?
yeah,
Spro?
like
What's up, Spro?
the some of the guys at Gentile, I go there like every Monday after on my way home from grocery shopping,
Mhm.
and they always are like, "Hey, Spro," just like, "Hey,
That's so funny.
hey." And it's probably easier to remember maybe than Asa. I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting. But enough about me. I feel
Oh,
like you
yeah.
mentioned that we haven't caught up in a while. And last time I got on Instagram, well, not last time, but recently, and I didn't know, and you were like gallivanting around Europe.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because I had some minimal coffee experience in Europe when I lived in Italy for a summer, but this was like way before I was actually interested in coffee.
Mhm.
And I have hot takes about particularly Italian coffee, but I'm curious because I think you were in Italy. I think I saw you.
Yeah, yeah, so a friend of mine recently moved to Germany, and we decided we would do, like, a little Euro trip, so we were, like, mostly in Italy, but we spent a little bit of time in Austria, and then in Germany, and then I spent some time in Sweden as well, or, Denmark.
Okay.
I was in Copenhagen.
I feel like their coffee scene would be pretty sick.
Yeah. I had some incredible coffee there. I went to April, which, I think is
It's
pretty
pretty well,
popular.
yeah. They make, like, equipment too, they have the drippers and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I went to one of their studios, and, like, they call them studios because the way they have it set up, it has a very different feel than a cafe. Like, really a lot of attention to detail in the design, but you kind of feel like you're in someone's extremely well curated living room.
Okay.
And, they, like, pre-grind all their coffee, so you don't even have, like, the sound of a grinder going off.
Huh.
Yeah, which
How do
is
they plan for that? I feel like they
right?
end up with a lot of wastes, like,
Either they have a lot of waste or they're rushing in the back weighing things out and grinding it or
I guess, yeah, they
something.
could do it, like, somewhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure on the flow of it, but I actually appreciated it because it made things, like, really quick. Not that in that type of coffee setting, like, speed is not always, like, the most important thing,
Mhm.
but, there was kind of this subtlety to everything where it felt effortless, and,
Okay.
um, the coffees were incredible, and the baristas were extremely personable and, uh, not pretentious, and just it was just a lovely time. And the
Nice.
coffee was incredible.
Yeah.
But you're gonna make a comment about Italy?
Creating content about particularly espresso, which is, like, coming from Italy, you have a lot of opinions You know, like people, a lot of Italian people have come into my content section or comment section and just been like bitter, like so
How dare
angry.
you?
Like there was one that went kind of viral where I made like a mocha pot in a specific way and they like just lost it.
It
You
was
know,
not the
like
right way.
people telling me
Not
like
the
you can
Italian
never,
way.
yeah, like you can never come to Italy. If you come to Italy, they'll kill you.
Oh,
And just
no.
like I'm like, what? Like
Ugh.
even though this is like my job, it is just coffee. You
Yeah.
know, like as if preferences don't mean anything or progression. Like
Mhm.
I have a lot of people who are like, oh, you used all those tools and it's still not as good as the coffee that I got from, you know, the bar down the road where the guy just distributes with his hand and like doesn't really pay much attention to the tamping and just throws it
Mhm.
in there and pulls a shot and it's the best thing I've ever had. But I feel like from the Italian perspective, there's like the traditionalism and the like the heritage and like the history behind it. And then you have
Yeah.
like an American who goes to Italy and has probably a mediocre to bad espresso and like, you know, probably a Lavazza or like
Yeah. Yeah.
illy espresso in like a piazza that's like the birds are chirping. There's like pigeons running around and it's warm and sunny and like you have that whole experience and they
Mhm.
color it in this vision of like being perfection.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the coffee. Like 0.
So, that is something I was very excited to experience, like, literally that image you just created of, like, really just going into a little espresso bar and just having that experience.
Mhm.
Something that I've, like, recognized in myself is, like, as I've worked in this industry and, like, tried some of the, like, quote, unquote, "best coffees in the world," I've found that my expectation and taste and just overall, like, obsession with the perfect cup of coffee has, like I feel like you get it's like a graph. It's like you get, like, really you care a lot about it. You care like, did they do that right technique? You're watching
Oh
the
yeah.
barista. Is their bar clean? And then it sort of is like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I
And
care, but it's I have an appreciation for it, and, like, I'm still that person, like, I spend a lot of time in education where I'm in a coffee shop and I'm definitely judging how you're doing things, but I don't let it ruin my experience,
mm,
and maybe judging's a little harsh, I'm at least observing, and, uh and maybe have some thoughts on it, but, like, I'm not gonna let it be like, "This is a terrible espresso now because they didn't, have perfect puck preparation." And so going back to Italy, like, I went into every cafe, whether it was, like, quote, unquote, "specialty" or just, like, the random bar on the corner, and was just, like, there to experience it, and I will say, I was, like, pleasantly surprised that the espressos I had were not, like, what I had expected. Like, I was expecting these, like, uber dark roast, like, ristretto, extremely bitter, but I found it wasn't, like sometimes it was just, like, that normal shot of espresso I would get here. Maybe it was a little
sure.
darker, but something I really appreciated was, first of all, most of the baristas are, like, elderly men, which was interesting. I feel like it's a contrast to what we
Sure.
experience here,
Absolutely.
where, like, your barista's maybe the college student or young adult that, just has their job. It's, like, very it felt very professional. Like, there was one bar I walked in, they were in, like, suit and tie, like,
Mhm.
slanging and it was also, like, a bar, so they're also, like, making cocktails, but then, it was in the middle of the day and most people are drinking espresso, and so there was this level of professionalism that I feel like you do not see here.
No.
And, like, almost a more of a seriousness in what they're doing. Like, I think there's you have those baristas here, like, in the US that, take it very seriously, but it's not necessarily everyone behind bar. It's maybe, like, those few that are really into it, and then people are just working their job, where everyone seemed very serious about what they were doing, and they were doing it, like, a very specific way, um, and overall, I enjoyed I enjoyed it, and if anything, I was expecting it to kind of be, like, something I wouldn't enjoy, and so I was, like, pleasantly surprised to be like, "Okay, it's a little darker," but even the milk preparation, I was expecting to be like super airy and like not very sweet and just like that. And like there was this one place in Florence that my friend and I, we just went for convenience because it
Mhm.
was like right at the bottom of our hotel. And it wasn't like they were like throwing down latte art, but it was like very silky and smooth and great texture. And they're doing it in these huge things. So it's like they're batching out like 8 cappuccinos at once.
I've seen those on TikTok.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But overall, I loved it. And I think, like I said earlier, my appreciation for all sorts of coffee uh, has like expanded the longer I've been drinking coffee and, you know, taking it quote unquote very seriously.
Seriously. Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned that because I feel like and I had this conversation when I did a Q&A a little while back where people were asking me about, how they can make, like, better coffee or, like, buying better coffees,
Mhm.
and I was like, I've gotten to this point now where I just sort of I've reached that peak that you were talking about where I was super interested in, like, really, like, interesting, unique, experimental flavors and, like, trying all these crazy things. And then now I'm, like, on that, like, slope on the other side where I'm more interested in trying to get the most out of, like, an 85 point
Yeah.
Colombian as opposed to,
Oh,
like, the co-ferments that, like, sure, they're fun, like, I'll have a sip of a co-ferment or whatever and be like, "This is interesting," but it's all so, like, one note,
mhm.
there's no complexity in a lot of them. They're kind of almost taste artificial, and so I'm just
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I mean, just give me a nice Colombian, and I'll do what I can with that." Like, I have all these bags of coffee, like, just off camera, and the ones that
It's such a great variety.
it
It's
is.
so great.
Well, some of them are just ones that I use for, like, when I put in a new set of burrs, I like to run a dark roast through,
Mhm.
and so that's what the Trader Joe's coffee's for, but, like, you know, they're Colombian, they're Mexican, they're, like, a Tim Wendelboe, which is, like, the weirdest one I have, that is a really difficult one to actually pull shots with, but, um, yeah, I just
Mm.
feel like the my interest level in, like, trying the weirdest, wildest, and, like, really trying to, like, go down that path of experimentation has ended, and
Mhm.
now I'm on the other side of that, where I'm just like, just give me a simple coffee, and I'll try and make it the best I can, and
Yeah.
then that's kind of just it.
And I think actually, like, the comparison of, like, my April experience to, like, the random bars I'd walk into in Italy is actually a perfect example of, like, that contrast where I felt the coffees that they were serving at April were that were, like I think I got what they were calling, like, their limited edition. It was, like, just a beautiful geisha that was delicious, but, you know, totally different experience than the, like, quick espresso you're having
Mhm.
on the side of the road in Italy, and, like, I've definitely grown in appreciation for both of those experiences, and, um, it's this is, like, maybe a side tangent too, but speaking of traveling, I used to, when I would travel, base my travels around very specific coffee shops where I'm like, I'm gonna go way out of my way to try this coffee and like maybe explore that area. And it would allow that to like sort of be what took me around this new city I was
Sure.
exploring, which was an amazing way to do that. But I feel on this trip, I didn't do that as much, especially in Italy. It was like, go to what's convenient and just like kind of get lost and uh don't don't be too, like, uptight about, like, which pl is that a specialty place? Like, I just would go to whatever was convenient, and I've noticed, again, with, like, that curve going back to, like, what's more convenient. Like, I was telling
Mhm.
you before, I haven't made it down to San Diego in a while, and I've actually missed some amazing places just because I'm like, "Am I gonna drive 40 minutes to to try some coffee?" And a younger me would have definitely
Yeah,
done that.
I feel that. I mean, I go up to Encinitas at least once a month to try, like, the new menu stuff that Necessity puts up
Yeah.
or visit my friends at, like, Bound Coffee, but it is one of those things, it's like, now I kind of keep my coffee experience to the pretty small
Yeah.
area, for better or for worse, you know? But, Yeah, the traveling experience is funny that you mentioned that because I feel like whenever I used to do that same thing, and like I think my family has gotten kind of like used to that, or even
Mhm.
like friends, people I travel with, and so when I'm like, we're going somewhere, and then oh, there's this coffee place, I'm like, that's not. I don't need to like prioritize
Yeah.
going to a specific coffee place like for any unless there's like a very specific reason.
Or it like or maybe like eventually you're let there and
Yeah,
that works out.
yeah, but it's
Um
just like always like I don't really need to focus down. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're a coffee guy, and we're going to this place, so let me tell you about all the coffee things." Like, no, you don't need to. Don't worry about it. Like, it's
Also, chances are you might already know.
I might already know, but also at the same time, it's just like you know, trying to be a well-rounded person. You know,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
That's not my like. I love coffee, but I also love pizza and I love plants and shit. So it's just
I
like,
love that you bring that up, and I wonder if any other coffee people that may listen or watch this can relate of how I don't know what it is about coffee and, like, coffee people and us who've, like, been so obsessed with this crazy weird product that it, like, almost became or has become, like, our identity
hmm
in a way, and, like, yeah, we wanna at least I agree with you, I wanna be, like, a little bit more of a complex person that, like, it's not just my identity, it's something I'm really interested in and I put a lot of time into, and definitely, like, I I was at, like, a little morning coffee thing, and, I was like did not mean to, like, take on the spotlight, but then I, like, gave, like, a seed to cup lesson to, like, a handful of people. I was like, "I'm that person who knows way too much about the thing that they're interested in. No one cares." But actually, I made some friends off of there, like, "That is really interesting." They were like, "I had no idea that's where coffee came from." And so, uh, yeah, we're more than the thing we're interested in and our job, you know?
yeah. I mean, like, I think job is also one of those terms that's like kind of looked down on in our society, like career, passion, whatever you want to call it. But in the long
Mhm.
run, we're all stuck in this capitalism rat race. So it's like, does anyone want to be, you know, pigeonholed into like their job?
Yeah, I think that's something again, like, as I've matured in my roles and my just, like, my career in coffee, I feel like it's I've been able to sort of separate what felt like an identity a little bit more and, like, become a more well-rounded person.
Well, I think coffee in general draws in people who are very like detail oriented.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people who aren't, who come in and work it as a job, but the people who stick to it are people who have very, like, specific type of person. They
Mhm.
all be maybe different personality-wise, but they have this specific trait where they're, like, very focused on, like, the minute, and I was looking at comment section, and I don't respond to, like, every comment or anything like that, but I read a lot of them, and I saw one where a guy was like, is everybody so obsessed with zeroing their grinders? I've never done it." And I'm just like and I thought about it for a second, and I was just like, "That's pretty interesting that you've, like, bought a grinder and never zeroed it. But if you're happy with the product, I
Yeah.
mean, who cares?" But, like, that's just really kind of goes to show you that, like, the type of people who buy a coffee grinder, specifically to be a home barista, are gonna be a very specific type of detail freak where they're gonna be, like, measuring to a micron and, like, every time they open their grinder up, they're gonna be zeroing their grinder, and there's, like, a whole rigmarole that goes with it,
Yeah.
but every once in a while, a different one sneaks through.
Yeah, and, this is, like, going back to, like, what we were saying before, but actually, I have kind of found myself I was never really a home barista. I got into coffee, like, loving working in a high volume place, like, making coffee after coffee, and I've kind of, like, come around, again, as I've, like, gone on this this little curve, now that, like, I kind of I've been home roasting more, for the listeners, I've been a roaster for about almost 10 years now in a commercial, like, professional setting, but, I've been now doing, like, more home roasting and, I bought an espresso machine from Asa, and so I've been,
Mhm.
like, playing more in, like, the home like, getting into more of the minute things and, like, learning what brewer I actually do love and experimenting with that. And that's like another reason I haven't really made it out to a lot of these newer cafes, because I've just kind of been appreciating going down in deeper in a different way. Like,
Yeah, it's a different rabbit hole for
yeah.
sure. Because in a cafe, it's more or less kind of set what you have to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, there's certain recipes you follow, and, like, sure, like, in the roles that I had a little bit more room to experiment, but ultimately it was, like, with the goal of how does this function in a cafe? Versus being like, "Okay, now I can, play with long extractions or just do things that, like, I maybe wouldn't have had, like, the time or space to, like, fuck around with."
I feel like there was time you did do some of that during COVID. I
Yeah,
feel like there was
definitely.
like a
There
bit of a lull
was.
where you had the opportunity to kind of try out different drippers and different shots and
Yeah.
stuff. I think we talked more about shot styles at that point than I think we ever
Mhm.
had.
For sure, and I think that was, like, especially in a cafe setting, like, things were just the landscape of that changed so much,
Mhm.
so, even a brewer I never really touched until that happened was the Clever, because like, we were dealing with, like, being short-staffed and, like, how do
Sure.
we, make, a $5 pour over a little bit, like, easier on the labor, and it was short-lived.
Yeah, I feel like I remember that being
But
relatively short-lived.
yeah.
Yeah. But, there's a lot of factors in a cafe too that like
Mhm.
at home, I mean, I got into home stuff working in essentially as a dispatcher
Yeah,
for technicians.
because you were also working in homes, am I correct? Or was it
No,
mostly commercial machines?
it was like, yeah, it was mostly commercial machines. We didn't really touch things that weren't like La Marzocco was pretty much the only home machines we would touch for the
Yeah,
most part because they
yeah.
used a lot of commercial like pieces.
Mhm,
Um, but that's how I ended up getting a Linea Mini because
mhm.
my brother was working at La Marzocco and he had a family discount, and I was like, "Yo, bro."
Give me that.
Yeah, so that's where it all started, and I just remember those days are very nostalgic, you know?
In your
Like,
old apartment?
yep,
Oh,
it's, it what day it was I get the memories every once in a while on, like, Instagram or, like, Snapchat will send me,
mhm.
like, that day, and it's funny that that day is January 6th,
Whoa,
2017.
okay.
Yeah, foreshadowing.
2017.
Yeah, 2017 is when I got my Mini.
That feels, like, so long ago, but also, like, not that long
Yeah,
ago.
it's true. I think, the era that we lived through from 2020 to, like, 2022, I think we all aged a little bit more than,
Yeah,
we normally would in an average
definitely.
year. So that's probably why it feels so long ago. But yeah, definitely
Definitely a
it was a
different
minute.
time. Yeah, different time.
It's just weird to think back about, like, just the level and I just, like, I wanna try and relive that, like, excitement for coffee, right? And I
Yeah.
feel like moving on to
Mm,
trying something so outside of and so different from what I'm used to, I think is, like, really the only way I can try to manage that, which is
mhm.
why I wanna, like, try and rebuild that Creminia or move on to just a really classic spring lever machine to see what that's like, so
Do you feel like you find that excitement in, like, being able to, like, play with these different machines, or do you feel like you're itching for that in some other way?
what I want to do is try to find that excitement more in coffee and less in the equipment.
Okay.
And that's like I think the angle that the next year of content, or I guess this year of content is going to be in is really focusing down on trying to make my channel more about coffee over products. And so
Yeah.
that's like the key. And so what I've committed to is just having this be like my main machine for a year. Like there'll probably be a few things that'll cycle through. I've got this Flare 58, I've got the Cremina. Um, but more or less like all of my espresso content will be on this machine. And that has changed my my whole process is like more or less completely different at this point now because I'm just trying
Yeah.
to figure out how to pull a shot on a lever machine, which has a wider sweet spot. In my experience, it's been like the shots have more or less all been like pretty tasty,
Mm.
but having a shot that looks good,
Mm.
particularly on camera, which is
Yeah.
when like that matters, right? And also just the messiness of a spring lever machine is like I can't stop the shot. The shot's gonna
Yeah,
keep
it's
going.
going.
So I just have to just let it run and or into the drip tray or just slip another cup under there. It's a whole different experience.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to play too much on a lever machine. Like, I think I've pulled like, been somewhere where I've pulled a shot here, but I've never worked on one. But all the shots I've had off of them have been delicious.
Yeah, it's a whole different flavor. So, I mean, sort of. I just feel like the texture is so much ramped up and the
Mhm.
sweetness is ramped up and it works really well with some coffees, and some coffees I have not been able to get a shot that I like out of them.
Is there, like, a through line there? Is it, like, a roast level
It
thing
seems like
or
it could be roast level because
Mhm.
I've definitely swapped some burrs around and tried to like I'm like, oh, when I first got this, I was using like a really, the SSP unimodal,
Mhm.
like modern, super low fine, high clarity, low body, like burrs. And I was like, oh, this isn't it worked pretty well with some coffees because it kind of offset the traditional sort of extraction that it does. So you
Yeah.
had like a a shot that had, a good amount of clarity, a good amount of that flavor separation, but also still had some body because of just the way it was pulled.
Mhm.
But then you moved over to like, a pretty light roast like that Tim Wendelboe that it's like I think it's a Kenyan.
Yeah, it's a Kenyan.
And it's just like so hard to wrangle to get it to like run without like channeling or doing anything crazy because you're
Mhm.
putting a ton of pressure on it all at once. And so I was just
Yeah.
like, the shots were okay, but I was just like, "Oh, okay, well, let's switch it." So the folks at Zerno were kind enough to send me some more burrs to test. So I have like the cast, which are basically lab sweet burrs
Okay.
in there now, which I haven't tried with that one yet, but it is a very different flavor process. But the I'm trying to figure out a way to not have donut shots,
Mm.
which seem to be a pretty
Yeah.
common on lever
The
machines,
yeah.
but I haven't really figured it out yet. And honestly, it doesn't seem to matter that much in terms of like the final product.
The overall flavor and
Yeah.
yeah.
So like that's the other trick I'm trying to like nail down. Do I really need to worry about that? And so I went back and looked at extractions on like because I obviously have videos of every machine I've used in the course of
Yeah.
like years. And so I looked at the decent and I looked at my GS3 that is now your
Mhm.
GS3 and I looked at like my mini and like other machines I tested and a lot of them do that. A lot of them start at the outside and make their way in the middle.
Yeah.
And I'm like that just must not be as much of a problem as like, you know, folks make it out to be.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm just like not super worried about that anymore, but I was trying to do all sorts of like traditional tamping methods like the
Ooh.
attenuating stuff, like
Yeah.
trying to
Oh.
tamp like the outside first and then
Yeah.
it's just like, yeah, it's been an experience, but yeah, maybe I should turn this thing on so by the time we're done,
We can have some yeah,
you can try
I was
one.
actually, like we had some shots
Oh
off
god.
the
There it goes.
uh, I feel like your mic's probably pretty good. Can't hear it too good.
We'll
But,
see.
he's got a very professional setup here. It is.
I mean, I try to make it a professional setup. You know, it's tough. I think it won't pick up a lot of stuff, but I think that's the one downside of having this lever machine so far is like the one thing I can say is it sometimes just scares the living shit out of me.
R Does it just go like, "Arr," like,
Yeah,
randomly? Or like,
I
"What's
mean,
happening?"
because obviously there's no pump used to run the shot.
Yeah.
So the pump in there, unless it's hooked up to water, which obviously it's not because I don't have a water source in here and San Diego water is trash.
Yeah, don't break your machines with SD water.
Yeah, so I was like, well, someday maybe I'll have a system, but at the same time, just like I'd have to have a plumber come in and put a hole in my wall and put a
Get a filter,
like a
yeah.
whole thing. I had to get a whole house filter. So it's not really on the in the cards, but there's a pump that fills the boiler, right,
Mhm.
from the reservoir. That's the only thing. But I'll pull like 2 shots in dead silence. And then I'll start pulling a third shot and I'll be like so focused to just like really in the moment, listening to the drops and this is like the last shot in my dial-in too, and it's like the perfect shot, and I'm
You're
just
like,
like,
"I
"Oh
got it.
yeah, this is so
It's
good." And
perfect."
I'm like, maybe I'm filming it, maybe I'm just trying to get a nice video on my phone or something. I'm just like, yeah, 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 and then just and you're just like it comes out of nowhere. So
Oh,
that's the one. It's not really a them problem, it's more of a me problem. But
sure. Yeah. Yeah, but the shot off the Breville was really good, but I after talking about this, I'm dying to taste that, like, textured body and sweetness you're talking about. That's,
yeah,
like, what I want in my espresso is, like, a
same.
beautiful texture and sweetness and some balanced flavors, and you can make me happy.
Yeah, I'm less interested in like that than I used to be in like having like one of those crazy coffee experiences with my espresso. Like
Yeah.
I like a nice coffee, but I feel like there's so much potential in other pieces of like a lever machine or just
Mhm.
a set of burrs that can open up your coffee in so many different ways than
Yeah.
just like buying kind of the craziest coffees out there. Even and this is one of the things I was thinking about too is and I brought it up in that video from my last video of 2024 about how the space that I'm in has changed, right? Just
Mhm.
in like the last few years, specifically, like from 2020 to 2024, how the influencer market more or less has expanded, and how it seems that like there's so many more people doing it, but not so many other people actually doing it differently
Mm.
or like
Mhm.
innovating in any which way.
Yeah.
And I'm just like thinking about that. I was like wondering what your take, like in your world, how has the coffee space moved in like the
Mm.
last 4 or 5 years?
Wow. Okay. Well, a lot has changed for me personally. Just like I left my full-time like big coffee job a few months ago. One to like explore things on my own. And then I had just been with that company for a long time and it was time for a change. So there's big I feel like in the last year there's just big changes for me and like
Hmm.
what did it like what is it that I'm even doing in this industry at least in a work sense. I'm still very much enjoying it and you know, I mentioned I'm home roasting and brewing coffee at home. I've been doing pop-ups and slinging coffee to my friends. I'm literally like the coffee drug dealer. I like will go to a friend's house and like have my scale and I I'm like veering away from packaging when I
Sure.
can. So I literally just bring a bucket of my coffee and I just like pour it out for them on the scale like how we used to do it when we're like dealing weed.
Right on.
It feels it's a
It's a
funny
very California way
it's
to go
very
about
Californian.
it.
But so that just career-wise, the space I'm in, that's changed a lot, but,
Sure.
I mean, if we're looking at the larger scope of my experience in, like, the commercial side of things, I mean, so much has changed. I feel like everything has changed.
Hmm.
Like, everything from the expectation of the customer to the pool of employees and people's, like, the passion of the career barista, I feel, has changed a lot in my experience in working in a place that had 6 cafes. I feel like just even just, like, the demographic of people who were in the coffee industry and, like, 2020, I saw so many people leave coffee,
Sure.
right? Like, change careers, go back to school, explore their passions. Uh, that was a big thing that I saw, like, my whole, like, colleague base turned over time and time again in the last few years. Um, and then if we're looking at, like, coffee itself, like, the coffee that we're buying and roasting and selling, uh, I feel like I mean, and, you know, I have a very specific perspective in the demographic that we were serving at the place that I worked, where I think even through you know, through those 4 years, they're still expecting the same thing. So, we're still sourcing, you know, really beautifully, like, clean, wash coffees, when we source natural coffees, making sure that they were also sweet and clean and
Hmm.
not defected. And I feel like for me too, in that position I was in, I was a green buyer, that it was such a volatile time for everyone that maintaining relationships with producers was like the top of my priority. Was that even through this time, if volumes change or quality is changing a little bit, we're still buying the coffees from the producers we had been working with. So, and that didn't always look like, your 90 plus co-ferment coffee.
Sure.
It was like really playing out the commitments to those relationships. So I feel like when it came to that, and again, it's like such a singular perspective of like a certain brand with certain flavor profiles. Um, I think we kept to looking for those coffees and to like maintain those relationships.
Do you think that the model, I see a lot of cafes kind of going down this model, at least like stuff that's opened in the last year or two,
Yeah.
going down the road of like only serving those really kind of wild
Yeah.
coffees? Like, do you think that's, kind of putting themselves in a position like it didn't seem like the broad majority of people are still not even on the specialty train, let alone
Mhm.
like wanting coffee that tastes like insert whatever,
Mhm.
right? I got a comment. I did a video about dark roasts, maybe a couple of years ago now. I can't remember. Just kind of like defending them as an item,
Yeah.
and that there is a place for them. And I got a
I
comment from someone recently, and I didn't respond to it, but I saw it, and I just was like kind of laughing to myself because it was just like said something like, "Oh well, when I get a coffee, I want a coffee that tastes like coffee."
mm,
And like,
mm.
if you want melon, go eat a melon. And
Hmm.
I'm just like, that's a pretty boomer take. It's a pretty hardcore boomer take right there. I mean, uh, I don't. That's somebody who doesn't understand the coffee world and the respect that like there's so many different types of coffee,
Yeah.
like, and those flavors are inherent in the beans, unless there's like some kind of flavored coffee, which we're not even
Sure.
talking about.
Yeah.
But just like it's kind of wild because I think my parents probably would have a similar perspective. Like
Totally.
whenever like we got my parents on a specialty program, they love Cometeer because it's like
Mhm.
easy. They don't like it's already essentially dialed in. They just thaw it
Yeah.
out, and so they don't like stuff that tastes like fruity, any sort of
Yeah.
acidic fruitiness. So I just feel like there's still a wide majority of coffee consumers out there who aren't in that space, and so I just wonder if there's like a if it's a growing of a space where people are gonna be clamoring to go to cafes that only have,
Yeah.
like, strawberry co-ferments.
Totally. And I've noticed that too. And I'm someone who can have I'm very much like a empathetic person who can like look at something that I might disagree with on like face value, but then like look at it and be like, let me look at it from their perspective
Mhm.
and see if I can try to understand it. And I do think that there's room for it, especially with how niche specialty coffee already is, to like have the niche within the niche. I think that there's room for it. Whether it's on scale, you know, I don't think I know the market that well, but I really appreciate when I see someone who's like, this is what I like, and coffee's already this place that people who are doing it are really passionate about it. And like if they want to stick to their guns and like offer the things that they love and they're excited about, I think people will show up for that. Because I think people, they're gonna love the coffee, but I think they're gonna love if the people who are serving it are excited about it and the experience is like tied into it. I think they're gonna go regardless if it's like their favorite cup of coffee. Because I think in their
True.
minds, like I think even going back to that Italian beautiful like fantasy scenario where it's like it almost isn't about the coffee.
No.
It's like if people are excited about it and create a space that make people feel welcomed and like that is the package. Yeah, throw out your co-ferments. And I think I do see a lot of those places that do offer that also try to have some sort of thing on their menu that's going to be the more approachable thing.
For
And then I
sure.
think it goes down to the service, you know, hopefully they're not pretentious of like, oh, you want our like not exciting wash coffee with some vanilla. Like as long as they're welcoming to that and have that, like I'm assuming if they have it on their menu, they're probably gonna, you know, graciously serve it. But
Sure.
I do think having some sort of approachable point into whatever niche you're focusing on is probably important so you don't alienate the boomers that are walking in that just want their coffee to taste like coffee.
Yeah.
But
But the funny thing,
yeah,
like in my head when I read that, I was like, bro, you don't even know what coffee tastes like.
right?
You know what char tastes like.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
that's not
and
even what
I
coffee
mean,
tastes like.
if we could go down a rabbit hole of that too, of like you want it to taste like coffee, but like you said, there's all these inherent qualities in coffee that
Mhm.
like it a coffee can have flavors of strawberry. And it
Yeah.
is still a coffee, and arguably it is a coffee flavor that we can, you know, remember, like, you know, we can pull into our like memory bank and relate to another flavor, but that is a flavor that coffee can have. So, uh, I mean, if we're talking about roasty flavors, then that's like a whole other thing. But
And
like
that's what they think coffee tastes like.
exactly, they're looking for that roast flavor. And
Mhm.
actually, I've done some consulting over the last few months, and I had a client, and their whole thing is a dark roast. And working with them, it actually like created a whole new appreciation for it, and like also doing some roasting for them, like it learning about how to apply flavor to coffee through the roast versus the very like classic specialty coffee roast style that's to highlight the inherent flavors of the
Mhm.
coffee.
Sure.
Where to like go down the roasting rabbit hole of like playing not so much with the flavors of the coffee, but more with like how roast can influence flavor has been really eye-opening and interesting from like just a roasting project perspective,
Sure.
but also like even in a cupping space of like cupping and tasting specifically for roasty flavor
Mm.
has been and doing it in a really thoughtful way has been really eye-opening and interesting and has allowed me to have an appreciation for it. Because I know some people I know some roasters who I know that they've dark roast for a client, and they will literally just throw it in there, and they don't even look at it. Like, they're just like, "Roast it till it's burnt." But being someone who loves roasting and, like, loves, like, manipulating the curve and, it's been kind of cool to, like, be thoughtful about it because like,
Sure.
when you've cupped those, like, they're just like in your light roasts, I feel like there are differences, and you can tell when, you know, you've just turned it up and it's at the highest heat and you're just turning it black versus like when you're being like considerate with how the coffee's taking on the heat and how you're kind of achieving those flavors.
Yeah, I feel like there's a right way and a wrong way to do every like, I mean, I don't know. I guess the best way to put it is there's more than one way to roast properly.
Yeah,
I definitely will
absolutely.
argue that there's not only one way to do it, and there's, like I guess there's no, like, proper way to do it as
Yeah.
long as you're happy with the product, I guess in the end, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a dark roast specifically, I think there's definitely some technique and some thought that should go into it in terms of trying to balance preserving some of inherent flavors on top of creating the roasty flavor that you want. I remember when I first got the Hive and I had some like pretty nice natural Ethiopia
Mhm.
and I roasted that to the point where I think I was just seasoning the drum.
Mhm.
And so they wanted to go until they were like oily.
Yeah.
And I personally had never really done that on purpose before.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, okay. And so I just did it. And then I just kind of threw it in like a bag and just tried it like a couple days later, just out of curiosity. And I was like, this actually is like pretty good.
Yeah.
Like I'm not mad at this. Like I can
No.
taste some of the inherent like fruitiness of the like classic Ethiopia natural, but I can also taste a bit of the roastiness and that extra bit of roast also brings out, you get thicker crema and you get just like a
Yeah.
different cup experience overall.
Totally, totally. And this is like my brain just went here, but something that's like the most disappointing thing you can do to a dark roast is then like get it like have it extremely under extracted. I don't know. I
Mhm.
feel like diner style coffee. Like I feel like that's like a very like we think of dark roast, we think of like diner style coffee.
Sure.
To me, a lot of times it's like really watery. And like a dark
True.
roast that's super watery is like the saddest thing.
Yeah, it's gross.
It's so gross.
Yeah, definitely a heavier ratio for dark roast
Yeah.
for sure.
I'm like, why does it no, you're just like drawing out all the not good flavors of this.
Yeah. I and I feel like the same way for espresso too, because I feel
Mhm,
like I said, I run some dark roast through when I switch burrs. I don't really believe in seasoning, but that's a conversation for another day. But like I put some dark roast through just to kind of oil everything up and make sure everything's like moving properly.
mhm.
And sometimes I'll just throw it in a portafilter and pull it. And I feel like this machine, and again, I'm not going too deeply into this machine yet, but like I feel like lever machines are made for short shots. They're
Yeah.
just you can do like the Fellini method, which is
Mhm.
like kind of like pulling it down, letting it go up, pulling it down again to like try and get more water in there.
Yeah.
But like I had just such good ristretto experiences with it, or
Mm.
just a little bit above ristretto, and like a dark roast too. It's just when you pull it as a ristretto, all that roastiness goes out the window, and all you get is like baker's chocolate, and it's just like
Yum.
it's just like a very classic, but also sort of slightly modern. It was just a really, really nice shot of espresso.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could have pulled that out of a standard pump driven machine.
Sure. Wow, that's really cool. Also, ristretto.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like that's a thing we've kind of gone away from as, like, coffees become lighter and lighter. They just don't quite hit the same.
No.
And there is something to that, and I feel like even going back to Italy, like, I feel like there was a few shops I went into that had lever machines, and, yeah, you get that ristretto shot that's just, like it's almost like drinking chocolate or something.
Yeah, and they're just so thick, you can almost like chew on it. Like it's
Yeah.
just like such a
It's totally
yeah,
different than, like, what I'm getting off DGS3 or something like that.
100%. Yeah, and
Mhm.
so that's why I'm really looking forward to kind of digging this thing a
Yeah.
little bit further. But yeah, the lever experience is a whole different it's a whole different world.
Ah,
But yeah, like the whole roast level thing too is I feel like dark everyone's opinions on dark and light, and unless you're out there using like an Agtron and you're on like the agreed upon numbers or whatever that I don't even know what those are. I feel like everyone has a different idea of what light and dark
Totally,
and
right?
medium and all that stuff. Like, and I also think that sometimes coffees can be deceiving. Like sometimes a natural or a decaf will look
Mhm.
dark, but like not roasted dark at all.
Absolutely, and I feel like depending on the machine that you're roasting on, like, some machines lend themselves to the outer being maybe a little darker, where,
Mm,
like, some machines you might roast to a certain color, but then, like, the inside's a different color.
sure.
So that's kinda plays into it as well.
Yeah, it almost feels like because there's no actual agreed upon global scale,
Mhm.
everyone or not everyone, but like I see like a lot of roasters putting like a little notch thing on their thing or
Yeah.
whatever. But even in the grand scheme, when I look at those things, if I were to go get a light roast from, I remember I picked up a light roast from Starbucks like last year that was
Yeah.
like oily. And I pick up a light roast from like Trader Joe's, which is like probably closer to a medium dark maybe,
Mhm.
and I pick up a light roast from Tim Wendelboe. Those are 3 very, very
Very
different, right,
different
light
light roasts.
roasts. So
Yeah.
it's just like, it's kinda just made up.
Yeah. Actually, I'm curious on your thoughts on this because you always have hot takes. Like,
Mm.
what are your thoughts on packaging and, like, labeling it light, medium, dark? 'Cau
I don't really think it's that useful. Um, I feel like the first place I saw it, like, very commonly, I think, like, locally, Bird Rock was doing it for a long time. If
Yeah.
you go, like, outside, like, I think I've seen Onyx Coffee Lab do it for a long
Mhm.
time too. But I feel like most people, if they want a dark roast, they're looking for, like, a French a French roast, and that's
Yeah.
usually, like, a different coffee, you know? Um, But I think as we've moved at least into like modern specialty coffee, I just feel like it's almost just so arbitrary and so like dependent on like whoever roasted it, how their feelings are, and it's just
Yeah.
like not like I said,
Or like
there's
it's their dark roast for their lineup, but like it
yeah,
might not be, yeah, that oily bean that people who are looking for a specific roast level are gonna get. Then there's like the rabbit hole you could go down of like flavor notes,
oh yeah,
right?
that's a big one.
Yeah, and like I go back and forth with like, do I want flavor notes on there? Do I like I think overall they are helpful, but I think I ultimately, especially if I'm going to a cafe, I kind of just want the person to tell me what it's gonna taste like.
Yeah,
But it's definitely a telephone, and you're kind of guessing or hoping that they've tasted the coffee and they know how to speak to it. But
sure. I mean, I went down that same road when I was roasting coffee and selling it, but I sold it online, and so
mhm.
I was like, well, do I need to put it on the bag because people are going to the website
Yeah, they're gonna
and they're
see
reading the
it.
description and they're buying it? Does it have to be on the bag? And I still ended up, I think, putting them on the bag if I recall,
Mhm.
but I just feel like it's nice to have a general understanding of maybe what a flavor profile might be, but I also feel like roasters kind of try to one up each other with like how weird they
How
can
weird
get.
and specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And I think you posted something recently on your Instagram about like the coffee language and how like
Yeah, I did.
someone in like Colombia doesn't understand what like a nutter butter tastes like or something. And when you put that shit on a bag, it's just like means nothing. So there is no global coffee language either. Same with the
Mm-mm.
roast. Like this type of stuff I think should be like globalized
Yeah.
because the SCA is the Specialty Coffee Association, not it's not the USCA anymore. They're not
Yeah.
delineated by country. They should just be a global nomenclature for everything.
Totally, totally, and that's, like, where I've 'cause I can be on the cupping table and, like, we can get really specific into what type of orange I'm tasting. No,
Mhm.
it's this specific orange, no, um, but I think and, like, I'm picking up a theme in, like, my thoughts on all of this, or it's, like, a younger me maybe would have been wanting to be really specific, but I feel like as time has gone on, I'm like, I'm okay with us being like, "This is chocolatey."
Mhm.
You know,
A little bit
this
of
is
citrus in there, you
there is
know?
some citrus notes in there. Like, I think also generalizing it allows maybe people who are still learning to, like, not be so, like, polarized or, like, embarrassed if they're, like, not tasting, Meyer lemon.
But then there's
Uh,
marketing, right? And I think part of
yeah,
it is marketing too. So
totally.
it's like I've bought bags of coffee based on what the flavor notes are because they're so weird,
Yeah.
right? The famous one I did a video about flavor notes a long time ago was I think mango white claw,
Yeah.
and I hadn't even had a mango white claw before, and I was like
Hmm.
so I just went down to like the convenience store and bought one, and I was like, this doesn't taste like mango
Not
white
at
claw. Why are
all.
you lying to me? And so it's, you know,
Was there, like, a boozy flavor or something?
no, I remember the roaster is good. It was like some kind of Saints, City of
Oh,
Saints or
yeah, I
something
think
like
they're
that.
based
They're
in New
in
York,
yeah, the
right?
Brooklyn, I
Yeah,
think.
I totally remember when you made that video.
And I like their coffee, but it was just like that one note. And there's a lot of roasters that do that where like the first two notes make some sense, and then the last note's like Little Red Wagon or something like tastes like a road trip through, Wyoming. And I'm just like, what does that taste like?
Yeah.
Like, what are you trying to invoke in me other than anger?
Like, I get what they're trying to do, but it's like it's an experience, right? They're trying to, yeah, evoke some sort of experience that maybe you have no
Yeah, like
relationship
that's their
to.
experience.
Yeah. Um, oh, man. I mean, I feel like both you and I might be feeling and this may go back to, like, your 20 between the last 4 years, like, maybe I'm a little jaded.
No, I
I think
definitely
we're a
am.
little jaded,
I
right?
definitely
Of,
am.
like,
Yeah, 100%.
where it's because then you feel yeah, it's like coffee's this, like, commodified product. It's this product, it is a
Mhm.
commodity that we are yeah, people are just trying to figure out how to market differently than the other roaster down the street, and I think it to me, I go back to and this is something I've experienced in the pop-ups I've been doing, because something and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, is like try not to be so damn distracted by all of the shit on the internet and like trying to do like what the other cool guy is doing
Yep.
and like trying to like and I have to I'm still in that like building and like developing phase, and I'm literally on a daily basis like stop trying to compare yourself, like don't look at what they're doing, just like do what you want to do. But in the pop-ups I've been doing, I've thought a lot about like, "Oh, what is my branding? Like, are people gonna get it?" Like, and I'm still working on my branding, but I've noticed is that when you go like when you care about what you're doing and you create a space for people to come, people love that.
Mhm.
And there's no brand attached to it. There's no like special stupid tasty note that like is what's pushing it. It's like it's the space that people are in, enjoying each other's company, enjoying a coffee, like, and that's something in the roasting I've been doing on my own. Like I think I'm like tied up in like having worked for a big company where like there was so much emphasis on that, and then
Sure.
like all the things you're seeing on the internet, and try not to get mixed up in that. And like I've noticed in a few of my pop-ups, like of course I want to talk about the coffees because I'm excited about them, but like a lot of times people won't even ask. They're like, "Oh, what is this specific coffee?" I'm
Mhm.
like, they're like, "Oh no, this is just a tasty drink and this is a cool environment and like everyone's super nice and friendly and uh this it's like almost not about the coffee." Again, I've like gotten in circles about that, but
No, I think that's essentially the direction that, you know, I want this, not only this podcast, but this channel and what I'm doing to kind of move into, to be
yeah.
less about the products or what someone else is doing or how they're doing it and talking about, you know, whatever cool next thing is coming down the road that's going to
Mhm.
make your coffee incrementally better based on my opinion or someone
Yeah.
else's opinion, and more so about like the community of coffee. And I think it's sort of, I don't know if it was is a factor of COVID or what it was, or it's also, I mean, probably a factor of just capitalism in general, but
Mhm.
you know, the commodification of like everything. Also like try to maybe shift away from, you know, the items being so associated with the enjoyment of coffee and just like narrowing it down to like the enjoyment of coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. So, man, I first of all love that for you, but I think I'm also trying to find that in my own way. Like, in the last few years, I've got really into surfing, and so I've been doing this thing where I go surf and I've like built out like a little mobile coffee setup, just like that I
Mhm.
throw in my trunk, and then when I'm done surfing, I have my little camp chair and I have like a little stove and I make my little AeroPress, and it's just kind of for me.
Yeah,
I would love to like part of like my next step is wanting to do that on a bigger scale where like people can come and do that with me, but it is like more about the experience in
sure.
it, and um it's enjoying coffee, enjoying the process, um but maybe, like, outside of this, like, hyper clean, hyper, like, fixated lab setting in coffee, and, like, more enjoying it in these different experiences.
And I think, you know, what you're talking about is also a different experience in coffee that I feel like the market of coffee, not so much like the specialty market, but to a certain
Mhm.
extent, this is there where like I think in the broader majority of coffee, it's not about coffee, it's about caffeine. What's the caffeine about? It's about like efficiency and you working and being a better
Yeah.
worker, which all
Which
goes
is
back
totally
down to capitalism. So it's just like I'm
it
stuck.
totally links into, like, the history of coffee in the US specifically
Yeah.
too, like,
Because they
ugh,
can't give people meth like they used to, you
yeah.
know? So now you just have to, you know, drink your coffee. Like my partner,
Drink your coffee and get to work.
she was telling me like she works in like a corporate job, and she was like, "Oh, like Red Bulls are only $1 at work." And I'm just like, "Yeah, I wonder why." They want to keep you efficient, like a little good worker. They
Yeah.
don't want you getting too tired on the
Yeah.
job. They want you to just keep going.
I feel like that's another thing that has changed in the last 4 years too, is just like everyone's relationship to work.
Mhm.
And like, I'm not saying anything new. I feel like this is like, you see that in people working more remote jobs and like people working, more places going to like 4 days a week work days. Obviously, the coffee industry and like the service industry, that hasn't really changed. But uh I think for me, I'm in a fortunate spot of being able to try to look at what that looks like differently and like, yeah, like I guess almost slow down.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for me, I can speak to like a lot of people stopped working during COVID. I worked like twice as hard during COVID. And I think I can say that for a lot of people who worked in the service industry,
Mhm.
where like the places that they worked didn't close down and, there were less people working. So everyone who was there had to work just like 5 times as harder. Like, so, um, it's so weird for me, I think, in like my life transition right now, how it actually feels like for the first time I'm actually being able to like look back on the last 4 years and be like, holy shit, what just happened?
Yeah,
Like,
the pace has
I have
changed.
yeah, it's changed a lot. Like, I mean, that's like the joke you hear everyone say, right? Like, it pretty much there were like 2 or 3 years there that just sort of disappeared because like,
And I think a lot of people have nostalgia for that
yeah.
time. Like, don't get me wrong, like it was a frightening time, but I definitely have nostalgia for it because I could get out of everything. Like I could
Yeah,
be
like,
people be
sorry.
like, "Oh, you should, come to whatever," and I'm just like, "Oh, well, COVID."
Can't really do that.
And so at that, I think I can probably give not only that everyone was kind of locked in and so few people were going out for coffee to the fact of like my rapid growth during that timeline, but
Yeah.
also, the rapid growth of brewing at home and how that market has just exploded on top of
Mhm.
like the market of influencers talking about that and doing that. And so it kind of brings me full circle to being like, now that the market is so saturated with people all saying the same things, I don't want to do it
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to bring something else to the table. And so that's
And I
like the
feel
whole
like
point.
your audience and any newcomers want that because I can't speak to it for everyone, but I know that's like something when I'm like doom scrolling or whatever, like I'm like, fuck, this is all the same. Like it's
Mhm.
all the same. And it's exciting when you see something that's totally like screw the trends, like just doing them. And I think it goes back even to like we were talking about the co-ferments. Like when I see someone who is just like in their zone and in their lane and not trying to like follow what everyone else is doing, I think that's like who stands out and what inspires other people to do their thing and like ultimately is like and it's like I'm like faking it till I make it because I'm saying all that, but I'm still like, can get wrapped up in the whole thing. And I'm sure you know it very well because you're living it. But
Yeah, I mean, I just from my perspective, I feel like there's just a lack of authenticity anymore.
yeah,
And
totally.
I, I feel like, I was a party to that to a certain extent because I had to put on a specific type of face to get to where I am. But
Mm-hmm.
now I don't need to do that anymore. Like, I'm not saying I wasn't real or whatever. Like I've always stood by, my approach to reviewing and talking about things and like trying to be, myself to a certain extent. But also there's, when you're trying to make it in like any job, it's not like you can just like blow off the norms of that job, right? So I think part of it is just because so many people came in all at once and they're all looking at the stuff that works. And so they're all doing the same things with the same tone of voice
The
and the
tone of
same
voice.
layout and the same and like I definitely fell into that too.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if I look at my older stuff, um, and even some of my not super old stuff, like some of the shorts and stuff I did, like there is a cadence to it that like just sort
Mm-hmm.
of happens. And I'm assuming that probably won't happen in this, right? I feel like
Yeah.
people watch this and then watch even any of my scripted stuff, for the most part, it'll sound a little bit different
Definitely.
because I don't have to sit down and write a script and plan these types of conversations. And that's
Totally.
also one of the benefits and one of the reasons why I want to do it, because it's like,
Yeah.
it's a break for me, more or less.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like, again, like getting other people in here, getting like fresh perspectives of like what's happening sort of outside of all of that. So,
Yeah, and if I keep this going for another year or so, then the expo will be here, and I'll probably be able to bring in a few other people
that'd be
that are out and
so
about.
cool.
Which, yeah, I'm excited to have expo.
Are you going to Houston?
I just got approved for my
Press
press
pass?
pass, so I will be there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do there. I haven't been asked to do anything quite yet. So, but even if I do anything there, it'll be like one thing, probably at
Sure.
most.
Yeah.
Because I do want to try and film more stuff in that experience. It just, it gets overwhelming, and my brain is just like, what do I film? How do I, it's just, it's
Yeah.
a
There's
lot.
so much.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
just need to like practice kind of doing on the road type of filming before I get there. So I'll try and work on that.
Yeah.
That's another one of the content directions I want to go in. Just more traveling, more fun stuff, all like centered around coffee stuff, but most likely won't all be coffee specific,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. And I think that's great because, like, I think if you can encourage and influence other people to like lean into the other things that they love in life, like, I think that's great.
We've been doing this for a minute now.
What, this podcast?
Yeah.
I have no concept of time.
It's because this is like a casino. I have the windows
No,
blocked. There's no
it could
natural
be dark
light, so you
out.
have
Who
no
knows?
idea what's going on out there. Yeah, it's just the way it's set up. But
Oh.
I think probably I don't want to go too long because I feel like it can
Yeah.
end up being a little bit hard to edit and all that stuff. But of course, we'll probably have you back in the future. But
Yeah, no, I love like the organicness of it. Like, again, it's been a while since we've caught up, and I'm sure we're gonna continue talking off
yeah, I'm
of
sure.
this
I'm sure.
because there's probably
We'll
other
get
like
some,
non-coffee related things to chat about. But
yeah, and we'll pull some lever shots and all that fun stuff. But for now, thanks for coming, being part of episode 1. Hopefully, we'll
I'm honestly honored, Asa.
yeah,
Thank
I
you
hope
so
it turns
much.
out as well as like I picture it in my mind. It never turns out as well as I picture it in my mind, but like I'm trying to not be such a perfectionist.
Well,
So
something I love about the podcast format, at least from like a lot of the podcasts I listen to and watch, it's like obviously there's a little like funny feeling because you got like mics in your face. There's obviously a camera, and I feel like
mhm.
no matter what, that's like you're aware of it. But
You kind
I
of
think
forget a
like
little bit
you kind
down
of forget, and then also like the more you do it, and like the more I kind of like even like the behind the scenes, like when you acknowledge certain things or you like bump the mic or like it's like we're real people in a real room, not looking at a script. Like we're
Yeah.
just chatting.
I mean, I didn't
And
even know how to
so
start this thing, so we'll see how I plan out that edit. But I don't even know how to end it. So I guess for now
I think that's fine. Well,
we're just gonna wrap it up.
yeah.
We're gonna call it a day on episode 1. But hopefully
Thanks,
y'all
Asa.
enjoyed.
This
Of
is
course,
really nice.
thanks for coming, and of course, questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the comment section down below, and we'll see y'all in the next episode.